Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome back to HR Week 2023. Again, if you just joined us, this is all about innovative HR transformations, changes, big ideas, fresh ideas, and trying to make sense, putting all this together and trying to make sense of it all and moving forward, certainly in the right direction. Next session right now, employee connectivity, our workforces, our employees, our teams, how can we help them, guide them to work better together? Since the pandemic, since things started to get back to normal, that question, what is best? Remote working, in the office, bringing our teams back to the office, a mixture of both, hybrid or something completely different. Those questions are still moving forward. However, what we're going to hear now is some data that's going to kind of back up certain areas of those elements. I'm intrigued as much as you are really to hear some of the elements, some of the data that's actually going to, as I say, back up the impact of these different elements, and will hopefully help you work out, well, not work out, but help you make sense of really what you're doing and the impact it's going to have if you stay with what you're doing, or potentially change the way you're connecting your workforces. Let's hear now from our speaker coming in right now with us, SVP Employer Experience from the DAZN Group, Paul Bennun. Paul, come on in.
Hi, Peter. Thanks very much for that intro. Something to live up to there in terms of giving people a bit more data and helping them understand what they might do, but I'll do my best.
I'm sure you'll do well. Before you carry on, I'd love to know where you are. Where are you right now?
I'm in central London at the moment. I was originally going to be dialing in from home from Yateley, which is just south of Reading, but I've had to pop into London today, so I'm dialing in from Victoria.
Victoria, wonderful. Okay, there we are, from London to the world. Over to you. I'll join you just a couple of moments just before you finish.
Thanks very much, Peter. So hello everyone, and thanks for joining my session today. Today I'm going to talk about in-office, hybrid and remote environments, and I'm going to try to use a little bit of data and graphs from 2 Microsoft studies on the future of work. I'm going to share the questions and the areas on which I think we as HR professionals should try to focus our thoughts and our efforts to drive the best results for our businesses. My one sort of big caveat at the beginning is we don't yet, and this is really important, I think, for everyone to remember, we don't yet know the full impact of the changes that have come about as a result of COVID. We're only a few years into the impact. It's going to probably take another decade of data and analysis for us to truly understand the impact of the different changes that are happening around us. So really right now, we're all kind of attempting to be futurists. We've not seen the long-term impact of the changes on businesses, on our commercials, on our people, or on society as a whole, and we've only seen the short-term impact. So yeah, please bear that in mind throughout. I'd like to start by setting the scene a little. As I'm sure everybody feels, we're going through an era of unprecedented change, and whilst there's a lot that we don't know about the future, there certainly are some things that we know and can say for certain about today. So firstly, the hybrid work area has begun. I don't think anyone's in doubt about that. And whilst employees are clear on what they want, businesses are lagging behind in terms of forming and communicating their plans around, or solidifying their plans around remote, hybrid and in office. You can see that here in the data, the graph on the left showing that all workers still want at least 2 days per week working from home. That is starting to drift back into what we might call normality, but we can certainly see those who are already working from home still want to continue doing that. Those where it was introduced are taking it and now want to continue that and don't want to go back to a pre-COVID environment. What we don't see is clear long-term planning from businesses around how to address that. If you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that the big grey bar showing no long-term intention for work from home plans has stayed relatively stable, and whilst the other bars showing planning are shifting, there's certainly not a unified agreement between businesses around being ready for the future on this. And that's to some degree quite understandable, because over the past 3 years or so, pretty much every business has gone through challenges and made decisions about its workplace strategy, but may not have come to conclusions around the long term. Typical questions phrased around how should we operate, where do we want our people to be, where do our people want to be, how much do changing employee needs affect our search for talent, what's the impact of remote work on diversity and inclusion, what's the impact on performance, Why should we pay for offices we're not using? And what should we actually be using our offices for? All of these are questions that I don't believe they have a unilateral right or wrong answer to them. They all have a lot of conditional factors, potential benefits, drawbacks. And it's important to remember, as I said at the beginning, we don't know the long-term impact of any of these areas. Whilst we know what people want, we don't know the long-term impact of those changes. Secondly, workplace technology is changing. It's changing rapidly. When and where work happens is in flux and is actually co-evolving as the technology changes too. We're seeing new hybrid meeting environments, transformative improvements in asynchronous communication, novel applications of recommender systems, and of course the use of VR and AR productivity environments and the dawn of AI. These technology improvements are altering work now and are moving at pace. Managers have to consider more over how and where we meet, how they can be more inclusive of remote workers, and general competence in both synchronous and asynchronous comms channels is more in demand, and people across the workforce are having to adjust to new norms. Thirdly, our definition of productivity is changing. I'll talk a bit later around alignment around terms on productivity and why that's important, and why I don't believe we're where we need to be at the moment. But it is important to recognise at the outset that the last few years have brought additional focus on areas like well-being, burnout, and how that couples up with the impact of high productivity, along with an increased concern at leadership levels that remote work is negatively impacting our productivity. Finally, and I'll say it for a third time because it's a point that I really want to drive home, there's a lot that we don't know. We're a few years into the changes. Certain aspects of remote work are often portrayed as either great or terrible, but we don't yet have the long-term impact data to prove any of those assertions yet. So that is the landscape, and within that landscape, ultimately, employers and leaders are looking to HR for clarity on how we'll set up our new ways of working. Questions quickly boil down to which of three approaches we as leaders and businesses will take. I don't think presenting you all with embrace remote work, bring people back to offices, or develop a hybrid approach with a set of pros and cons for each is overly helpful. So today, I'm not going to give you an opinion on where your people should be based or what your location and workplace strategies should be. And I'm not going to advocate more for any one of the options, but instead, I'm going to try to give you a few key areas or topics to consider when you look at the future of your business, areas that I believe are perhaps not yet recognized or discussed in a wide enough manner, though the research certainly exists for us to inform those conversations. I'm going to talk about three areas for a few minutes each. I'll cover the importance of connectivity within the workplace and connectivity between employees. I'll cover the sort of nature of productivity, and I'll cover the impact of workplace strategies on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I'll wrap up with a little look forward to potential future events which could potentially have as strong an impact on workplace strategies as COVID has already. So let's start with the importance of connectivity. Back in the early days of COVID, Microsoft published a report into the effects of moving an entire workforce to total remote working. This was based on their US employee population. It's an excellent read. It's about 12 to 14 pages long. I would highly recommend this as a grab a cup of tea and spend some time reading it kind of affair. It's heavy on the data and it's heavy on the methodology, which is a good thing. So it's very much worth taking your time, being slow as you go through it, and sort of fully absorbing the impact of what they're saying and the implications within it. Today, I'm going to pull a few key stats and graphs out of that study, and I'll also use Microsoft's follow-up from 2021 as well. So one of the first visible outcomes from their study was when you moved people into a fully remote environment, there was a big increase in productivity, a spike in the amount of work done, a spike in the amount of work completed, emails sent, etc., etc. We'll come back later to the question of what productivity actually is and whether we're set up to measure it in the right way. But it is important to note that was very much a people getting in a remote box and churning through work. They also saw a big shift in how people communicated. Sorry, I've just come onto that slide a little early. They also saw a big shift in how people communicated. That was very expected results. We had the big shift away from synchronous communication, where we talk one-on-one between individuals, and a move towards asynchronous communication. So using email as a tool, using instant messenger. And they also saw a big increase in, obviously, virtual meetings and use of virtual meeting tech. This is really important from a trust perspective, and that's something that, again, I'll come back to a little bit further on in the presentation. Probably the most important discovery, and when I should be clicking onto this slide, is the impact of remote work on the interconnectivity of our people. So when the workforce moved to remote, Microsoft saw peer networks degrade significantly. Immediate peer networks, so the people with whom you work on a regular basis, stayed as strong as before. But the extended network, that degraded and that was not refreshed. So to put that in plain English, people lost touch with anybody who was outside of their immediate colleague network, and they didn't meet new people as new starters joined the business unless they were part of their immediate team. So to talk and explain these two graphs on screen a little bit, the left-hand side is when all employees moved to remote from an in-office environment, and the right is when there was a blend where you had some people who were already remote and some people who were moving from from in-office to remote. Now, across all of these, we see decreases across the number of ties that people had, around the number of time spent with people outside of their core network, bridging ties, a decrease in the number of added ties into people's network. And the author's hypothesis behind this is that this will result in a long-term decrease in innovation within businesses, primarily because whilst your immediate peer network can provide you challenge and can provide a great creative environment, you lose out on fresher thinking, you lose out on the potential challenges and new ways of thinking you might get from your extended network, you lose out on being exposed to differing goals to those within your teams. And this trend is made more clear by the follow-up study, which took place in 2021. So again, here you can see, although the colours have been flipped here, and blue shows people moving from in-office to remote, and orange shows always remote, you can see still that there is a big and longer-term drop-off in the wider network. That also leads to several key issues for culture in the workplace. Most obviously, there's the potential increase in silo working and isolation. Not only do we have data to show that interpersonal connectivity weakens, as we see here, we also have common sense to remind us that increased levels of remote work increase the amount of time we spend away from the social environment of the office. So when I talk about social environment here, I'm not just talking about team events and excursions, I'm talking about the day-to-day interpersonal interactions that come from being physically in each other's presence, with your team, with other people, that kind of serendipitous communication, if you will. Secondly, there's a big cultural impact, a move towards when you operate in an isolated environment, there's naturally a move towards what's more important for me individually, be that work-life balance, be it the ability to own my own space of work, the ability to regulate my own environment. That is individualistic by nature and not collegiate. I think we probably all know that it's harder to foster a team environment when people are geographically dispersed, and that's a challenge we've had pre-COVID as well. But importantly, B, when individuals' mindsets has shifted away from perhaps creating a great team environment as the priority and more towards creating a great individual environment. And then I believe both of those get exacerbated by a potential decrease in trust. So trust is quite a difficult thing to build. It takes time, and I've always found the best way to build trust is through a series of ongoing interactions, proof points that people can be trusted, and reduced social contact reduces the potential occurrence or building of trust within businesses. And then, as I started by saying, there's the potential decrease in innovation and creativity, which was referenced within the study itself. Your immediate peer group holds the risk of becoming an echo chamber or reinforcing groupthink, whereas your extended network brings fresh perspectives, new ways of looking at things, unexpected challenges, and alternate aims and objectives. As I said at the beginning, I'm not presenting these as a case for the office or for hybrid or for remote. I'm presenting these as factors that we must consider when designing workplace strategies. How do we increase connectivity between employees? How do we encourage interconnectedness between teams who would not interact in day-to-day work? And how do we safeguard against isolation and protect well-being? As we ponder those two questions, the other two areas I want to touch on are the impact of diversity and and how we define productivity. So let's tackle the latter first. Let's go with productivity. There are my three sort of sum-ups on the importance of productivity. So when we look at productivity, the two key arguments of getting people back in the office tend to be increased productivity and increased collaboration. Now, I'm not sure what your experiences are here around collaboration, but I know that if I get in touch with a team of engineers within my company and throw out increased collaboration as a reason for them all to come back to the office or meet in person somewhere, I'd get a quick answer back of, well, we've been collaborating online for the last 3 years, thanks, and we're doing pretty well at it. except maybe from some of our creative teams who do value the creative benefit of getting together into a room. Productivity, though, is more complex. We can draw, as I said at the beginning, we can draw data to show increases of productivity for being remote. We can do the same for being in office. And it all really comes down to how do we define productivity. To illustrate the fact that there is not alignment around how we define productivity, again, this is from Microsoft's 2021 study. We can't even agree on what productivity is. All right, so I don't propose trying to solve here unilaterally how we define productivity. That's going to take a much better brain than mine to work out how we measure productivity and performance and relate it to the working environment at a macro level. But what I'd like to do today is highlight the risk around easy use of the term productivity without firstly clearly defining what we mean by productivity, and then secondly making sure that that view is consistent across our businesses and that all key players align behind what we mean by productivity and what we're trying to achieve through it. Saying that, I know that productivity is a key concern of senior leaders, but to reiterate, the data shows us that the challenge of remote work is not based around productivity or collaboration. It's based around connectivity between employees. So changing our mindset to focus on how we connect people as well as how we measure productivity and performance is going to be of ever increasing importance. Finally, I come to diversity. This is an area which skews the discussion somewhat on workplace strategy because there are really clear benefits from remote working, which could hypothetically improve inclusion and diversity within our business. And they're fairly well documented. Increased flexibility is excellent for recent parents, carers, as well as life commitments, certain conditions which require regular treatment, some disabilities, isolation and the ability to control your own environment is a huge boon for people from certain neurodiverse backgrounds. Avoiding the commute can make it more affordable for people from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, and having a remote policy opens up a wider talent pool, which can increase diversity. However, what's often not discussed is the potential drawbacks on inclusion from workplace strategy and remote working. And there are two main areas to consider here. And sorry, I shouldn't say remote, I should say hybrid and in office as well. Firstly, in a fully remote environment, what are the factors that can damage inclusion and diversity? And for that, I think we need to look primarily at the audiences that we may think may suffer in a fully remote environment. Those who don't have a habitable work environment and can't afford to create one. Those who may not have a safe home working environment and view the office as a safe space. Those who've not worked in a corporate environment before and don't get the opportunity to learn on the job or through exposure to peers. And finally, those who thrive on human contact or may be prone to loneliness and the downside of isolation. But most importantly, I think if you move into a hybrid world, there are really big hidden factors that may creep in from an inclusion perspective. We know that office returners are more likely to be white men, already a very privileged group. And we know that in-person contact builds trust at a faster rate. So you couple those up, and the people who are more visible are potentially opening themselves up to more soft career opportunities, more stretch and more progression within your business. So that has a doubling down effect where those returning are likely to be already privileged and may now be front of mind and more likely for career progression and advancement. And those who are less likely to return are more likely to be underprivileged audiences and may well see an exacerbation of their lack of opportunity. So it's really important to be aware of this and make it part of our planning around our workplace strategy. So let's recap. We've talked about three challenges, whether remote, hybrid, or in office. How do we connect our people? How do we define the terms we want to assess? And how do we continue to develop our businesses to be more inclusive and diverse? And I think the answer to all of those lies in intentionality. Being intentional with our aims. A broad commitment to increasing collaboration and productivity is neither clear nor compelling. We have to understand what we're proposing and why. If we don't understand it, how can our employees or our managers? Linked to this, be intentional with the issues we're aiming to solve. I'm not going to advocate for one goal over another, but I would advocate that you really dig into your goals and be really clear on your workplace strategy around what are you aiming for and how are you going to achieve it and why. Following that, be intentional with your actions, design specific solutions that address specific needs, create interventions with purpose and follow through on them. Be targeted, understand your audience and understand your business needs. Whether that's about increasing connectivity, safeguarding inclusion, be intentional. And finally, be intentional with our rules. It's an area which I got wrong at the beginning. Rules are important. It's easy to give people flexibility, slip into vagaries, but people, if we provide rules, it provides people with freedom within those rules. And a good example here is around unlimited holiday. And most people know the story here around companies with unlimited holiday typically show less take up on holiday entitlement because people don't feel like they've got the right and they're worried about doing too much. And the rules and the framework actually provide people with stability. So whilst you might get short-term pain and a noisy minority, setting rules is absolutely worth it. Before I wrap, just like, and I'm very conscious of time, I'd just like to iterate 2 points, which are around change in the future. You know, we have the climate crisis and we have the emergence of AI, both on our doorstep happening around us. You know, we're not going to go back to a state of normality. We're going to go through continual change now. So as we can't come out of COVID and think this is our plan to return to normal. We've got to come out of COVID and think, how do we take the learnings from a period of excessive change and build more resilient, fragile businesses that can thrive going into the future? I'm conscious I've probably run out of time to do final lessons, Peter. Am I
You're good. You're good. Yeah, we're wrapping up now. Yeah.
Fine. Yeah.
You done?
My final lessons then, just 3 really quick bullets. When you look at workplace strategies, there's no unilateral right answer. With any strategy, you need to consider what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there. Be intentional in goals, actions, and words, and recognize that there's no end game here. We're in a period of unprecedented change, and we're going to be in rolling change going on now. So focus on flexibility and anti-fragility. And that is me, Peter. I'm sorry for everyone.
No, it's all good. I'm although I'm not on stage, I'm not there with you. I'm listening throughout to all these sessions, in fact. And it's interesting what you say. Again, it's almost like there's no one size fits all. Decisions you make, you may have to clearly change those decisions or adapt them. And also what you said at the beginning, where 2 to 3 days per week is generally what people want in terms of working from home. But in fact, we still actually don't know really the actual impact of all this, right?
We don't.
We're not there yet. In like another 5-10 years time, then we'll probably have a better concrete picture. But still, right now, it's still too early days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We know the short-term impacts. We can see the short-term impact and the short-term benefits and cons, but we can't know how changing the way we operate our businesses is going to affect businesses, the economy, individuals over a 10-year period. Like, if we could know that, we'd make an awful lot of money from knowing it, but we don't, right? So it's important to stay flexible.
Absolutely. Flexible is the name of the game. Listen, Paul, thank you so much for sharing these insights really today. And I'm sure audience watching, that's helped us kind of figure out a little bit closer to where we want to be, or maybe a different approach, a different mindset in what they're doing right now. Either way, thank you so much for sharing your insights and ultimately your time as well. So thanks so much.
Thanks.